A very good afternoon to all. Thank you for joining us. I hope to make this discussion as vibrant as the young lady who just introduced us, and hope to match up to Mamati, who is currently filming us. But we have such erudite and highly accomplished people on the panel, and I'm sure we'll have a lot of takeaways today. A very good evening, good afternoon to you all. Harshali is a busy person. She's just finished moderating a session and she's now panelist. So I think if it's okay with you, we'll start that way so that you can catch your breath. Okay, Suhail, the very first question, and these are common questions across before we delve deeper into the subject. We may write our stories, but in a book format, but we'll always use mediums to popularize our stories. What do you think is the best medium to tell a story? Is it audio? Is it visual? When I say visual, I say, is it OTT or cinema? Even in a video game, perhaps. What are your thoughts on this?
Sure. Thank you so much for the question, and it's great to be on a panel. I was almost thinking that for any male speaker to be here, they had to hang sunglasses over here, it seems. But nonetheless, very, very pertinent question. So, what I feel, Anupama, is that it depends on what your target is with a particular, narrative. So, what I'd say is that the best mode is always a book, because a book will lead you to a lot of other places. So if you're looking at the genesis always has to be a book, because production houses are also looking for books to convert, right? You want something which you can feel in your hand, you can read. So I think that has to be the starting point, and then it has other benefits. If you're looking at making more money, or if it's something which is a more commercial endeavor, then of course writing screenplays or selling books for visual adaptations plays a very crucial role. But again, what I'd like to say is that writing screenplay is not a very easy task. A lot of people feel that because they've written a book, they will be able to write a screenplay, and while it may be true in some cases, there's a different format that people have to write a screenplay in, which is very different from a book. Also, I feel that as authors, we have, greater freedom to write the story we want to tell. Whenever you're doing a screenplay, it's always subject to the approval of a producer or a production house. So, the creative freedom may have its own boundaries in that case. And as I was saying, that if a production house wants to acquire a story, then obviously they'll acquire it when it's been written as a book. So I think the book forms the genesis, and all these are ancillary rights that come. You mentioned audiobooks, again something which is growing, and I think a lot of people are hearing it. But I'll also share a secret over here if I can. I don't know whether I should or not, but okay. So the thing is that a lot of authors want their audiobooks to be out, right? And they're always wondering when an Audible will give them a deal or not. But if you have Kindle Unlimited and you have Alexa on your phone, you can just ask Alexa to read the book out, and Alexa will read it. So it turns into an audiobook. So if there's any book that's on Kindle Unlimited, just ask Alexa to read it, and it turns into an audiobook. So there. You
mentioned Alexa here. I must, if it's okay with you, I must share a kink with you.
Sure.
So I have a nephew who stays in California. So just for kicks, whenever I call him, just to please me, because I'm looking at his college admissions and essays, he'll call his Alexa, who's Anupama Jain, and then it goes. And it's such an ego booster,
Absolutely.
So I guess we are allowed our small pleasures.
It's good that he's in the US, so you can use Alexa. If he was in Gujarat, he would say Alexa.
And Shah is a terrible 4-letter word. We can't talk about that right now. What are your thoughts, Mr. Kazi, on this?
I'll keep it short. It's books for me, definitely. And as Suhail rightly said, there's a different audience for each medium, right? And especially when it comes to movies being books being adapted into movies, it's a tough process, right? Because a big 200-250 page story going through multiple levels of resolutions and maybe minor conflicts, right? To package it into a 1.5 hour movie. It's a tough process.
Yeah.
And when I think of it, to be honest, there's not a single movie which I can say is better than the book, right? Even when it comes to the Harry Potter franchise, the movies were pretty good, right? But the books are far better, right? There was a lot of hidden things.
The nuances.
The nuances, you can say, that were not captured in the movies, and we missed that. So yeah, books for me.
So it's like cutting a circle out of a square.
Yeah.
The extra pieces, the
I
nuances.
agree. You have to leave it out. Correct.
What about you, Harshali?
I think I would agree with Faraz here that it would always be books for me. I enjoy movies for the instant gratification that I get, but I think books have this a strange way of unfurling, and I don't think anything else captures that. And because we like to read, the way we like to read, that's how we like to write. And that's how we want to achieve that. For example, if there's a book, there's a book called Alchemist that I read when it had just been released. And, when I read it, I thought, oh, it's a nice story. And I didn't get the layers of that book. And after a decade, I read it again. And I realized that it also showed me my own evolution as a person, as a personality, when I was able to discern other things that at that point of time, and the first time when I read it, I couldn't. And that is when I knew that I wanted to write a book that, someone would read again and again and be able to interpret it in the way that they wanted to interpret it. Because the story hasn't changed. It's just showing me the way that I have grown, if I can say that. So it's the books for me, for sure.
Just to add to it, I was at an event a couple of weeks ago, and there's an author of ours, Mr. Anirban Bhattacharya, and he's also, very prominent in the visual medium. He said a very pertinent thing that I'd like to mention over here. He said that, when you are reading a book as a reader, you are the director. So every reader is a director because the book is unfurling in the reader's mind. So they will try to ascertain who could be the best actor, how would this scene unfold, which is why what happens is that when actually, visual adaptations come out, that's how probably the director of that movie saw it, but not necessarily the reader who read it in the first place. So, that's a very pertinent point that I thought I must bring out over here.
Actually, I think each of us experiences that way life tempers us will also, make sure our interpretation is imbued, right? So my next question, again, this is a common question because all of us have dabbled across different genres. So do you think authors should stick to their core genres, core competency, or just to stay relevant? And it's a cutthroat world. There's so many authors. Should they constantly shift gears, even though, they may not do well?
Sure. So I'll answer this from the capacity of an agent, and, then both of them can take it up as authors. So, what I've seen is that be it any industry, and the literary industry is unfortunately no exception to it, there is this whole idea to typecast, and I have seen it from close quarters that if there's someone who's writing a book which is on romance fiction, and the lady later wanted to write a non-fiction book on an army officer, the publisher with whom she had done 2 highly successful books did not want to publish because they felt that the audience will not take her book seriously because she has created a niche in a particular genre, and the audience will not be receptive. Now what I feel is that may not necessarily be the best yardstick to judge, because what that in essence does is that it limits the author, forcefully limits the author. At the end of the day, writing is a creative medium and there are no limits on creativity, right? So you can have Sanjay Leela Bansali who will make a romance drama, and at the same time he can make a historical with those very elements also included in it, with equal finesse. So I think it's also necessary that publishers have a broader purview and overview and give the authors an opportunity to write a good book irrespective of what the genre is. That's one. Secondly, what I also feel is that at some point of time you also need to see how the market is evolving, right? Because I guess all of us know that for the past 3-4 years there has been a greater importance given on non-fiction books as far as the major publishers of the country are concerned, and those are predominantly because of commercial reasons, because non-fiction books tend to sell faster. And the example that I always give is that, and this is based on what I've heard, so it's like there are a lot of layers before you can actually buy a fiction book. For example, if you're going to a bookstore and you see a book called The Assassination of Rajiv Gandhi, now whether you want to buy it or not, your decision is made. You don't need to read the blurb to know what the book is about. Whereas if it's any other fiction book, you'll first have to read the blurb, see the print quality, what the MRP is, and then finally decide whether you want to go ahead or not. So for those very reasons, publishers tend to pick up, or bigger publishers tend to pick up non-fiction books. So the point is that if you want to reach to a larger audience and you also want to stay relevant, authors also need to look at that without really curtailing their finesse or passion for fiction. I'll give you a very good example, and gentleman is at the festival too. Mr. Kulpreet Yadav happens to be our author, and he's someone who used to write hardcore thrillers and very successful thrillers at that. And one day he and I were having this very conversation about how non-fiction is taking precedence and what we must do. And because he is from the defense, has a defense background, he said that let me try something in that space. And sure enough, we did the Battle of Rizangla, which was commissioned by Penguin, and now we're doing another book with them on the Battle of Hajipir. So if you see that he is also making a difference in terms of what he can write, and it's good, because I totally believe that every author can do that. When I was entering the field, Faraz had done a lot of romance books, but my introduction to him was through his horror book, right? Because that was the time I was writing, 2013, 2014, and that was the time The Other Side was coming out. And be it romance or be it horror, both the books did very well. So it shows that the writers have creativity. They just need that backing of the publishers as well.
Very well said. Completely agree with what Suhail said. Just to add to it, for me the process remains the same irrespective of the genres. Writing for me is a communication process, right? It's about the idea which I have in mind right from the time, even before I start chalking out the plot on paper or on my laptop. It should be the same idea which the reader processes when he reads the words, right? So the scenario that is forming in my mind, the visualization, it should be the visualization that the reader has should be as close to mine as possible, right? So when that happens, writing for me is a successful process, right? Irrespective of the genre. So as Suhail said, yeah, I also suffered the same. I got stereotyped as a romance writer. But I wanted to dabble in horror because there was a story to be told honestly, and it just so happened that there was like a blue ocean kind of a thing which no one had written in that area before, right? Talking about Indian horror stories in the commercial horror genre as such, right? So I never write for the market. I always write for myself. So that was just an interesting coincidence that happened. And I always believe when you write for yourself, the story just flows, irrespective of the genre.
What do you say, Harshali?
I agree to a certain point. I feel we should stretch the boundary. We should push the boundary, but we should also be realistic about it. In my view, it is you have to first decide who you're writing for. If you're writing for yourself, then you need to know, it's a skill, right? So, if I was to learn driving, I would learn the rules first, and then I would attempt to drive or to break those rules. So I feel that certainly we should, try other genres, but be very sure of what we are doing before we do it. Otherwise, it leads to a lot of heartbreak and a lot of self-doubt. And I say this with confidence in the sense that I was always writing about relationships. And then during COVID, our publisher came out with this concept that let's do anthologies on different genres. And that allowed me to explore and, be adventurous. I had never thought I'd write erotica. I had never thought I'd write horror. It didn't even, I couldn't even think that I would do something like that. But when I wrote the short story and I was happy with it, that if it were me, I would read this. And then I submitted it and it got selected to be published. I thought, okay, now I have that much faith that I have that I am happy with it, and so is a person that I trust. So I would say, take it slow and steady, go slow, learn the craft, learn how to do it. There's still one genre that I'm not comfortable, which you are very comfortable with, that I find myself taking a step back from every time, that is humor. Because I always worry that my humor may not be your humor, It's a very, very difficult, exactly. Yeah. So as I was saying that maybe I'm overly cautious. I would just say that maybe I'm overly cautious, and I would always be very sure of what I'm putting out into the, into the universe or into the market, and I would be slightly wary of being overconfident. So certainly try out different genres, but be very sure of what you're doing. Take slow and steady steps so that when your product is there, when your book is there, when your work is there, you feel proud about it. And if you are satisfied, then whatever goes out is fine. But probably it's my own personal this thing that I want to be satisfied, that I would read this book, that I would pick it up and read this book. And sometimes when you are still experimenting and not so sure and in a hurry, you would send out stuff which you may not be totally convinced about, even though the market is calling for it. So that is my 2 cents. They've already, I think, covered everything else.
The road not taken might be tough, but it's worthwhile at the end. Faraz, my question to you. In these days of swipe right, swipe left, don't you think love is an overrated 4-letter word?
I won't say overrated. It is just.
Isn't it?
I would just say how.
Because I say that with absolute. See, I have had a love marriage. Now it's a marriage. And love marriage happened very next door, Pune Vidyapet. But life strikes at you. So, how true is mush?
It's just how things have evolved, and love is something that is very personal for each one of us, right? Now, this days, it's very common. I at least know about 3 or 4 different people in my network who claim to be in love with 2 people or 3 people at the same time.
Oh my God.
So it's just, I believe, whether you want to call it evolution or devolution, it really doesn't have a name. But
they're brave people, for lack of better word. Multitasking at love is absolute bravery.
Exactly. So these days they call it open relationship. Yeah. So, but they claim to love everyone equally. So that's the part which is harder to grasp. So it's very personal for each one of us, and who are we to take a call? To be honest, it's just their lives and the way they feel the emotion, and if they feel that is right, then they call the shots, I believe. So.
Very measured and very crisp, not taking this side or that side. Very smart, I said. Harshali, you've dabbled across genres. In your series, Haveli is the character, and you have 3 siblings who had very difficult journeys. But you've traversed. The first book was very emotional. Second was she's caught in a threesome. Yeah, and third, she is a person who solves crime. So here you have somebody who is actually dabbling across genres. Which has been the most difficult book for you to write, and why?
I don't think any of them were difficult. I just was very convinced of the story, and that's why I wrote it. The number of drafts that I had to do, the maximum, if that can be called difficult, was for the second book for sure, in which I spoke, I wrote about this young girl who takes a decision which not many people in our country would approve of and is not considered polite in society. And then she has to face the consequences of that. Simultaneously, there was another story which was the parallel story of Noori, who's the courtesan 16th century, and how she finds her journal and is able to, solve her life issues through that journal, realizing that women are struggling with the same few things that they have been struggling for eons, and so has the struggle really changed? It was from a question that that bothered me always, because probably, and for example, Anupama, all my stories I've realized come from a very real place, because at that time I'm surrounded by those particular themes. Like the first book, Window to Her Dreams in the Haveli series, deals with domestic violence, marital rape, etc. Because I was dealing with those kind of women. I was trying to, I was on an everyday basis, I would hear another story. And so in the profession that I'm in, you have to be very stoic, and you have to be very balanced. But eventually we're all human. So you do question that, what is happening? Why are these women still there? Why are they constantly staying in marriages and relationships which are so toxic, and they know it? These are not women who are illiterate or who don't know. In fact, those women are much more empowered, if I can use that word that lightly. But when I was surrounded by these women, these were the questions that were bubbling inside me, and so I wanted to write about that and explore it through my writing. So for the second book, the first question was, because it was a threesome, I was very cautious. I have to use that word again and again, because I think that's part of my personality, that I was not sure if that would be received well. And the truth is that when I finished with the manuscript, my mother asked me, "Are you sure you want to write about this? You want to bring this out into the world with your name on top?" And I was like, I was not sure. So I wrote a completely different manuscript, because I was very convinced of the story. I was sure that this is the story I want to say, but because of the white noise that surrounds us, I was not sure how it would be received, what would people think, and I'll tell you the consequence of that. Every action has a reaction. So then I wrote a completely different manuscript on relationships, etc., with the same characters, and I handed it over, and I was not really happy with that. And then when my husband's my beta reader, so when I gave it to him, he said, "Why have you written this? That is the story you believe in, Anatomy of Choice," which we finally went back to. And he said, "This is the story that you've written with heart. Whether anybody reads it, doesn't read it, submit this. Don't go with the other one." And that's what I did, So I sent that story, and that got published, and it was touchwood received well. The consequence of that was that in a gathering such of august audience as you are here today, there was a lady who got up and who asked me that, "You've written about a threesome. Where is this coming from? Is this fiction or is this reality?" And I was literally, it just came out of the left field for me. I said, are you going to ask me that question seriously? Do you ask the same question to any author who comes to you who's written who's written about serial killers, etc.? I don't need to do everything if I have to write about it. I just need to have the grasp of the idea and want to know what a character would think about it, or how would they deal about that particular theme. And so as I said, that if that can be considered difficult, then yes, that was probably the most difficult for me to do, because I was kind of unsure of its reception. But once I was convinced that, and as I said, that some people in your life, are the ones who give you that strength. Sometimes you lack it, and just by saying, "No, this is your work, this is your voice, go with this," that was the strength that I kind of took from my husband, Chandeep, and that's where it came.
God bless you. If I may, I must share something. I hope you don't mind my telling this. So, her husband is a surgeon. So, whenever she gets a brainwave during the developing of a story, she'll wake him up and say, "Remember this, we have to write this tomorrow in the story." People usually leave voice notes to themselves. She uses husband notes for herself. Are we still friends, Harshali? Suhail, my question to you. Every second day I see you posing with XYZ author in the most picturesque of frames, successfully pitched this book. And how are you doing it every second day? And in these days of, Twitter tantrums and Insta stories, what chance do books have to make a stirring story? And that too in such a regular basis. So
Thanks.
you're giving us some serious promos also,
I was seeing an interview of Mr. Amitabh Bachchan, and it was a fairly recent interview. It was a couple of years ago, but he was talking about the times when he was in his heydays. So he was saying that a lot of people used to ask me the reason for my success, and I used to always tell them that, look, what is there that you will not like about the character that I'm portraying? He's singing the best of songs with pretty women. He's beating the bad guys, and he's standing up for justice. So everyone will like him. So in a similar parlance, I always say that, the job of a literary agent is very easy. It's the author who's bringing me a good script. There's a publisher who's believing in the story. I'm just connecting them. So, it just becomes easy. So I honestly feel that it's not my greatness, but it's the greatness of the authors who come up with these wonderful concepts and stories.
How about a round of applause to us hardworking authors?
And I think one is just lucky. If you do hard work, good work, luck also favors you. And I've been just blessed with a lot of authors, 936 of those till now, who have brought out some amazing stories. So I think that is how I'd like to respond to the first part of your question. I think as far as the second part of your question is concerned, it's a pertinent issue, because what's happened is that while the good thing is, and I remember I was here in this very room, I think in 2016, and we were having a discussion on publishing. And from 2016, at that point of time in 2016, there was a marked difference from what the literary scenario was in 2012, for example. And now from 2016 to 2022, there's been a further difference. The difference is that, the number of publishers in the country have increased. So I remember there was this lady, who was saying that, I'm feeling very demoralized because I don't get an opportunity and X, Y, Z. And I told her that, look, for authors who were writing in 2011-12, there were just 3 or 4 publishers. So the good thing was that they were really big names, but if they were not taking up your book, what option did your book have? No option. There was, portals like Flipkart and Amazon were also not there, at that point of time. Nowadays, you have those portals. You have a lot of publishers who have come in, the last 6-7 years. And to be really honest, and I always say this, that, the publishers, the younger publishers, and keep the word younger in mind and not young. So when I'm saying younger publishers would also be publishers, who've been in the trade for at least the past 5, 6, 7 years, have brought out at least 50 to 100 titles. So they're not young by any yardstick. They are the ones who are actually giving an opportunity to authors who write fiction. Because while non-fiction sells a lot and it, makes one's life easy, I often feel that, writing a book is 50% the story and then 50% the writing. In a non-fiction, the story is already there. So someone who's writing fiction has to do double the hard work. So because a lot of these major publishers do not take up fiction books due to commercial considerations, you need someone who believes in your story, who's able to give it wings, who says that let me take it up and bring it out to the audience. So those are the publishers that we should really celebrate, because they're taking the risk and they're bringing out more and more content in the market, knowing fully well that due to competition or reader tastes or current trends, the book may not probably do as well as a non-fiction book, but at least they have the, guts to bring it out in the market and share it. So I think a lot of these publishers need to get the due, because what usually happens is, I'm sure everyone will agree, that any author who reaches out, tells me that, oh, I want Harper Penguin or Rupa to publish my book, which is absolutely fair, and you should be aspirational, so there's no harm. And but the point is that if Rupa, Harper and Penguin, if every author wants to be published by them, then these three should be the only publishers in the market, which is not the case. Secondly, if everyone wants to work with them, then these three will decide who they want to work with. So they have the
Demand and
choice.
supply.
Exactly. So you need to be realistic, and so sometimes publishers say that authors will say that can I get the big five, or who's the best publisher for my book? So I always tell them that, look, I never have a yardstick, big five, big 10, simply because the publisher who believes in your story is the best publisher for your book.
True.
Right? Because if you send out a script to a Penguin, for example, and Penguin doesn't take it up and somebody else takes it up, so that publisher is the best publisher for that particular book, because they're showing their confidence and support for that. So I think that is what needs to be appreciated. I think all these publishers do not get a lot of credit, but I in my own subtle way would like to do that. And at the end of the day, one would also like to say that why publishers come up with these notions of looking at non-fiction is because at the end of the day it is a commercial game for them. I think ours is probably the only or one of the very few literary agencies that represents fiction. Okay, and I was sitting with my wife the other day and I was reading some of these scripts that had come, and I was saying that, look, this is absolutely fantastic. The thought, how the author conceived the story is brilliant. Why would I not want to represent it? Because I love it. So I should. Just because a third person may have an issue with it, it should not cloud my judgment. So it's very important. So when I look at scripts, I look at it from the point of view of passion and merit. But a lot of the publishers, because they have huge print runs to maintain, marketing, a lot of people, at the end of the day, it becomes a commercial a matter for them, that whether they should take up a particular book or not. So why are they thinking on those lines is also because the readers in India are dictating it to them. So the good thing is that there are plenty of books now, but there's also a problem of plenty because there are so many options. So obviously a particular reader cannot buy all those books, so they'll buy few. So when they buy few, a lot of other books may not necessarily do well, and then the publishers will look at the sales figures that are coming in. A few years ago, and I must tell this to everyone sitting over here, till a few years ago, it used to be the editor who used to take a call whether a book will be published or not. Now, if an editor likes the book, they have to make a presentation to the sales team, and the sales team will decide whether we should take up the book or not. If we are taking it up, what the print run should be, what the royalty should be, what the advances should be like. So the system has changed. So it's pretty much a numbers game. So I think readers need to read more Indian authors. I have always said that pick up books by Indian authors. There is no dearth of concepts, there is no dearth of creativity, there is only a dearth of opportunity for them, and that opportunity can only be brought out by the readers when they start reading them. Excellent. And that will bring about a change.
Excellent. For us, book to screen is the ultimate goal for writers. How difficult do you think is that goal achievable? And do you think as the book scene has exploded, has the OTT content or the OTT scene saturated, or have we just scratched the surface? There's enough to be exploited there.
No, I don't think it's saturated yet. It's a growing market, right? I feel there's a dearth of good scripts in Bollywood right now, and most people are, turning to books. I guess there are this book adaptation agencies which are doing pretty well now. Siddharth Jain being, leading from the forefront. Also, that having said that, it is one thing to get feel hopeful that your book will get adapted, and one thing for it to actually happen. because I guess just Shatrujit and I were just having this discussion a while ago. So even I'll give you my personal example. So TMD has been taken up for an adaptation by a well-known production house. It has been about 6-7 years, right? And post that there has been no news, right? All that authors get is that tag of soon to be made into a major motion picture that you stick it in the on the front page of the next edition that comes out.
Like
And
Mr.
yeah, it's just a flaunt tag, to be honest, and that's the ugly secret. But having said that, there are few books that see the limelight, and good stories are being told. So there's hope, and where there's hope, there's satisfaction.
May your book become blockbuster soon.
Sure, thank
Not
you.
just the book format, I'm talking about the OTT format.
To be really honest, it's a market, and I like to analyze a lot of things. So it's a market that slightly worries me. The books to OTT market, it's a growing market, it's an expanding market, but at the same time I also feel that it's probably a bubble waiting to be burst. And I'll tell you why. Because as he rightly mentioned, what happens is that producers will ask for scripts, for books. And we need to understand that, look, a lot of book-to-screen adaptations in India have gained momentum with the advent of OTT platforms in India, right? Because movies were being made since time immemorial, but books weren't being taken up left, right, and center as they are now, right? So that has brought in a change. So why are producers asking for books? Because OTT platforms are asking them for books. Why don't you get us a book on X, Y, Z? So the producers are doing that. Which is why a lot of books are being taken up. But are you actually seeing those being converted? And how many of those are you seeing eventually being converted? So what happens is that if you are selling the book as an acquisition, it's great. And I always tell my authors that, look, you've at least gotten the money. So just look at it from that perspective, because if you've done an acquisition, then it's really the producer's headache whether it gets made or not. The problem largely lies in an option. The problem in an option is that, so just for everyone over here, I'll just quickly explain what the difference between an option and an acquisition is. An option would be, say, a producer will tell you that, look, I'll take your book, I'll pay you 10 rupees for it. Right now I'm paying you 2 rupees. I'll take it up for 18 months. If something materializes, I'll pay you the balance 8 rupees. If nothing materializes, you take the rights back, the 2 rupees remain yours. So that's option. Acquisition is, a producer will say, I'll pay you 8 rupees. They'll pay you little less because the risk is higher. And they'll pay you the 8 rupees, and then the rights are theirs for perpetuity. They may make something, they may not make something, they may sell it somewhere else, they may sell it to a third party. That's their call, right? So in an acquisition, and what I've also seen is that usually producers who pitch to OTT platforms go in for options, because their success is dependent on the OTT platform giving it a green light.
Go ahead.
Producers who make movies predominantly prefer acquiring, because there's no time restriction on them. Then they can make it because they have greater control. But why I say that, so you need to see, because there are a lot of producers who will also reach out and say that, look, this is a great book, let me pitch it. If something happens, then we can work out the commercials. And there have been producers who do that. And I always tell my authors that do not go ahead with such kind of deals, simply because there are just those 5 or 6 OTT platforms in the country. So basically, if those have been sent the book out to, and nothing's come of it, say 6 months later or 1 year later, a producer comes and says that, look, I'd like to buy this, or I'd like to option it, you will not be able to take it up, because if you take it up, and the producer will go to the same OTT platforms and they'll say, "Arey yaar, ye kitab to hamare paas aa chuki hai." Then the producer will blast the author and say that you've committed a fraud, and otherwise the book will not see the light of day, because those people are still sitting over there. So it's basically one shot that you get, which very similar to the publishing fraternity. If a book has been sent to a publisher and they have said no to it, they'll not really look at it again. Options, of course, are that there are a lot more publishers, and the platforms are few. So I think the platforms also need to walk the talk. Secondly, what I also feel is that just like the publishing fraternity, there is a greater thrust on non-fiction as far as the OTT market or the visual adaptation market is concerned. And, I raised this concern with a producer, and what he told me was that, Suhail, what happens is that when I go to a platform and I tell them a very interesting story, they say, यार बहुत बढ़िया है, सच में हुआ था. And when I say yes, they say, इसको बनाते हैं. Otherwise they say, yeah, very interesting, but yeah, it's the creativity that's been used. But interesting story and actually happened, let's focus on that first. So that is one aspect. There are certain other production houses who have their own yardsticks, who would want to do, say, true crime, but they'll only want to do it with one particular author, simply because it makes it a great pitch. So there is a superstar who has a production house, and I was having a conversation with their team members, and they wanted to do something in the true crime space. But they said, do you have true crime books? So I said, yeah, I have this, and all of those books have been taken up, right, eventually. So they said, okay, but maybe, something like what Hussain Zaidi does, or if we can have him on board, because it just makes our job easier. So I told them that, look, you are sitting on that position because you have to sell a book. If it was easy, then anyone could sit over there, right? So if you are there, make the most of it. But I think the industry tends to play a lot safer, and I think that needs to change both from the sides of the producers, but mainly from the point of view of the OTT platforms. Yeah.
So walk the talk is the anthem. Harshali, my question. This is a conundrum that many authors face, as what Suhail has also been explaining. The crux seems to be this. So do we write for ourselves, or do we write for what the market dictates? And how do we continue to, push ourselves when there is no resonating audience out there? Because you have a story to tell. You have some thoughts on that?
I think belief in yourself, and the fact that, and in fact you started with that line, that who are you writing for? Even today, despite the fact that I have written a few books, I have written, poetry, I've written in several genres. Every time I start a story, I have to remind myself who I'm writing this for, because otherwise you get taken on different paths that you may not really want to tread. So I think finding your center, I think for me I can only tell you from my perspective, because when I write, I have to know who I'm writing this for. And usually the answer is for yourself. Whether this story will see the light of the day, or it will sell great, or it is marketable, or it is, all that white noise as I was talking about earlier, you need to put it to one side. Otherwise, you are not being true to your story, I feel. For me, that is the main idea. If I like a story, if I like an idea, I want to explore it. I started as a very organic writer. I learned how to plot. So you learn your craft. You learn how to develop it, make it better, make it shinier. You kind of make sure that you make the diamond shine. But essentially, eventually and internally, you need to know the story passes muster from your compass, from your shields, from your filters. That if you feel the story is good, then it is good. So for me, that has been the bottom line.
If it is okay, I would like to share a small thing with my debut novel. Everybody writes 70,000 words. I started with a 300-word story. It was a story, and Dipankar said, make a novel. So there was just one character going in for a 2-minute lift ride. So then we had to add, the core of the onion, then I had to build the layers. Can we take some questions from the audience? How much time do we have? Time is yours.
I think when you wrote the 300 words, you were only focusing on Padma, and when he asked you to write a full book, you had to get Paula, and then you became Padma.
I had only Paula. Okay. Then I had to get the Padma.
Right.
And Padma's parents and Padma's siblings. So that became the mess there.
Interesting.
So do we have some time?
We have 7 minutes, and if you'd like to remind
Yeah, I think we'll take, I'll ask one light question, because we've been talking such heavy stuff. So this is for the authors here. So my father said, that was his review for one of the books. if this book falls down, don't pick up. I mean, have you ever got any review such damning or such caustic remark? This thing, I'll confess, I had a Goodreads review. It's still there. This has wasted 2 hours of my time. Ouch. So, have you ever had a very sad review ever?
I think everyone would have encompassed it, to different degrees, because whenever you're doing something in the creative space, not 100% of people will like it or 100% of people will dislike it. Even a Sholay will not be liked by all 100 people. So you have to give that, number one. And as Harshali had mentioned, that if you feel that you've written a good book, and that is the assumption that you should always go ahead with, because if you yourself do not believe that you're writing a good project, nobody else will, right? So that's one. Secondly, you have to take them with a pinch of salt. Why? There are reviews which I've seen across, be it mine or with a lot of other people. There'll be people who will write reviews without even having read your book, simply because they may have an issue with you or someone related to you, and they'll book it. Yeah, and I think he'll probably expand on it. There will be people who will write a review, give it a 1 star, and it'll have nothing to do with the book. There have been reviews which have come that said that the shipment was delayed, so 1 star for the book. I mean, what can the poor author do over there, So, I mean, those kind of things happen. So you have to just take it with a pinch of salt and, just move on. If you believe in your craft, see, what you need to see is, has the majority liked it or not? That's one. Secondly, at the same time, if you think there are certain reviews which are fair, they could be constructive criticism also. Learn from it. Try to imbibe those things in your next book, because creativity is also a learning process. So you'll be able to discern whether this is a genuine review or a fake review, or if it is a genuine review but written with malicious intent. So those kind of things also. So that's what I'd like to say. And yeah, I think Faraz, you can maybe add.
You captured it pretty much. Only thing that I tend to do is I like all the reviews. Okay, whether it's a 1-star review or a 5-star review, you have taken out time for me, for my book, right? So I appreciate that. So thank you for doing that. That's all.
Yeah. So thankfully and touchwood, nothing really ouch moment for me. But when I wrote my 3rd book, Paradox of Dreams, I had I had read somewhere this really audacious review, which really, I got really shocked that how can someone diss the book to this extent, and it was not malicious, but there was no creative development or anything that you felt that this was adding to, the author can read it and say, okay, maybe I need to look at this again. And so and it was based on research. So when I did the first book, obviously there was research, but that was my subject. And the second book was again research on how people were talking about and how people were dealing with consequences of matters which were global in the nature, and how young Indian girls who were exposed to so much, were they able to kind of process that. So when I wrote my 3rd book, Paradox of Dreams, where this young girl who's blind and who's solving crime, she's also an empath, that review was like stuck in my head. And everything that I was doing in terms of research, I actually went on and on and on with the research for so long that finally the publisher said, enough, enough with the research, just write the book now. Because I was really worried that I didn't want anybody to read the book and say that this is not plausible, and because you are picking up a subject which is, is new and is not really dealt with a lot of depth, I would say. I didn't want to go wrong in terms of my review, in terms of my research. So I was researching for literally almost a year and a half when Dipankar said, enough Harshali, now you need to write the story. So I think that would have been, because these things stick with you. You can be really, blaze about it. You can say, oh, it's okay, it's part and parcel of life. And I agree with you there. But eventually we're humans. So if someone is, as you're saying, that one line has stuck with you for your first book,